schedule and the timings. And we'll go over a few changes, possible additions, like that. And I'll just hold until you're able to get that, because you really do need to take note of these changes. As leaders, I'm sure everybody here has a pen. Yes? Probably the easiest document to use is the timing document, but you could also be using the schedule. Now, the first of our items is actually on the schedule, but this is an elaboration. This is February 6th at 7 p.m. Yadubar Das and Vishaka Dasi will be presenting this fabulous movie, Hare Krishna, the mantra, the movement, and the Swami who started it all. This will be at venue E, the plenary room, right here. So that's going to be at February 6th, 7 p.m. It's already on the schedule, but this is an elaboration. On that day, there'll be no Mahakirtan. On the schedule, it currently says there would be. We'll just have the movie and not the Mahakirtan on that day. There's an adjustment of seminars for His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj. The February 9th and February 10th, which is day 6 and 7 of the ILS, is canceled. But he is going to conduct 3 seminars, so there's plenty of time for everyone to hear his seminar. Once again, that's February 9th and 10th. Those 2 are canceled. Please mark your timing sheet or your schedule, whichever one you're taking note on. We're adding a seminar, seminar number 65. The details are going to be updated on the ILS website as soon as possible. And Devaki Nandan Prabhu from Juhu will present Cultivation of Donor and Fund Development. That's going to be held 3 times. The first will be February 6th, the 3rd day, that's tomorrow, at 4:45 p.m. And the venue will be the Kirtan tent. Again, be writing this into your schedule. The second will be February 11th, day 8, at 11:15 a.m. The venue is going to be J, the Chaitanya Bhavan. And the third installment of his seminar will be February 11th at 3:30 p.m. And that's going to be venue D. We're adding a second seminar. Ranjit Prabhu of BTG leads the seminar, the 75th anniversary of Back to Godhead magazine. 2 installments of that. On the 6th day, February 9th, at 4:45 p.m., venue K. That's the Prasadam area. Isn't that Prasadam area just exquisite and lovely? It's such a nice atmosphere. And then Konteya Prabhu said that I should not be asking you this question because, of course, we're all fasting. But what I'm hearing is that Prasadam was really good, yes? So once again, then on February 10th at 4:45 p.m., Ranjit will lead a second installment of that seminar. Bhakti Marg Maharaj's drama. It's going to be held 3 times, February 8th, February 9th, February 10th. I'm quite positive that most people know that he's a big walker. So this is a picture of him walking. Of course, he has walked across the United States. He's walked across Canada. Anywhere else? Ireland, Israel, Fiji. Nice place to walk across. Guyana, Trinidad. So he's actually walked across these countries. Walked. Mauritius. Incredible. So, 3 times, February 8th, 9th, and 10th, at the Samadhi Auditorium. Door will open at 7 p.m. Drama begins at 7:30. And it's very, very important because he wants to make it comfortable so that it's not packed. ILS participants only, and you must pick up tickets. And you can pick up tickets during the Prasadam time in front of the Prasadam hall. You got to pick up a ticket to get in. I'll say that again. You have to pick up a ticket to get in. And that's going to be, the play will be Many Mothers, Many Fathers, which is the pastime of Chitraketu, the 6th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's only for ILS members. Pick up your ticket at the Prasadam Hall entrance. We have a couple of other add-ons from the time that we created that PowerPoint. Just wanted to remind everybody that the ILS bags have the image of His Divine Grace. So let's take care of them in an appropriate way. We have a need, the ILS administration has a need. If anyone is willing to let us borrow 2 HDMI adapters, and we need these for classrooms I and J at the Chaitanya Bhavan. We need 2 of them. So if you have an adapter that you can lend us, please see the registration booth. I think that's covering everything, yeah? Okay, those will be the seminar changes. Those people who have been at the ILS before, remember that every day we have to go through some changes. Change can be uncomfortable, but nonetheless, if change is good, then that means change is fantastic. Okay, Conte Babu, what's next? So, we're illuminating numerous elements, the 8 themes of the ILS. There is a saying that they have in the world of organizations that says that culture trumps strategy, okay? You like that Trump word. I guess there's a few Trump fans here. I'm sorry I didn't vote for him myself. And in fact, I've never actually voted once in my life because just philosophically I can't really put my vote to one of these people, whether they're this way or that way. So I didn't vote for Trump, but culture trumps strategy. We can get together and identify all of our problems. We can do an organizational scan. We can go forward and look at the environment and figure out what's best. We can come up with all kinds of objectives that are loaded up with goals. We can allocate resources to these goals. We can then say, okay, let's go do it. And then all of a sudden nothing happens. And in fact, most strategic plans actually fail. And most of the time the failure is related to not aligning the culture. Culture means basically, what do you really believe? Which then causes you to behave in a particular way. And the mass amount of behavior in an organization then creates a norm. And these norms are little and big. Some of them are so big they're massive. Some of them are small, but then they have many, many different effects. Not to criticize devotees, but I'll just give you one light norm. Most of the time, many of us are just late for meetings. Yes? Yeah. It's part of our norm. Is it an effective thing to be doing? Not really. But it must be based on some sort of belief. And that belief then directs our behavior. So as we move forward into a better ISKCON, an ISKCON that is getting closer and closer every step to the ideals that Srila Prabhupada has set forth for us. If we're going to be effective, we're going to have our cultures aligned with those ideals. So, we'll start with some fundamental notions of culture, and Konteya Prabhu will lead us on that.
Thank you, Gopabhata Prabhu. This, as you may remember from yesterday, is the first of the 8 main themes of this ILS. What culture and values will guide ISKCON's decisions and maintain its purity? What do we mean by culture? Gopabhata Prabhu gave some elaboration. In the dictionaries there are many more aspects. Culture as refinement of taste, like you say, a cultured person. A culture in the sense of a certain civilization, like Greek culture. And we are talking here mostly about organizational culture, how a certain group of individuals, both individually and collectively, think, feel, and behaves. Srila Prabhupada himself used the word culture in many different ways, with many different nuances. I just want to share 3 ways Srila Prabhupada used the word culture. A lecture in Bombay in 1975. Animal culture means to satisfy the needs of the body. And Vedic culture or human culture means to satisfy the needs of the soul. Very powerful sutra. Animals think in a certain way, humans should think in a different way. A lecture in London, Srila Prabhupada said, Vedic culture is very old. It is not a concocted thing or a new pattern. It is eternal. Therefore it is called Sanatana. Sanatana means eternal. It has no beginning, no end. So although certain aspects of culture change, there are certain aspects of the culture of the soul that never change. We will have culture in the spiritual world, and the culture of spiritual world is Krishna consciousness, is love for Krishna. And expressing that love for Krishna in particular behaviors, in particular ways. In a lecture in Bombay, Srila Prabhupada said, Vedic culture means Krishna consciousness. There's no other different meaning of Vedic culture. We are going to explore the notion of culture through the iceberg of culture. Icebergs means there is a surface element, a visible element that sticks out of the water, But generally, 90% of the iceberg is below the surface of the water. And so is culture. There are certain manifestations of culture that are visible, tangible, perceivable, but most are not. And deeper the aspect of culture, more intrinsic, more internal, more powerful, and more difficult to change. So we will use this model of three aspects, three levels of culture. First, what we call artifacts. Artifacts means behaviors, symbols, anything that comes in touch with the senses. Anything which can be seen, touched, smelled, tasted, or hear, can be heard. Food, for instance. Today when you take prasada, you'll see there's a certain type of food that comes from a different type of tastes, different type of preferences. The way we dress, the clothes we use, those are aspects of culture. The way we build our temples or our pandals, or even this stage, you could see there are elements somewhat reminiscent of Indian architecture with these little arches. So anything that you can see, you can smell, or you can hear about is part of culture. The words we use, the language we use, the slang we use. And of course, as we act or interact, that's also part of our artifacts, part of our behavior, how we speak to each other, how we treat each other. That's visible. How we greet each other. We may pay obeisances, we may embrace. That's all part of the culture. And this is the surface element of the iceberg of culture. But where those artifacts come from? Those artifacts come from certain stated values, official beliefs, mission statements. What we say is important. Espoused values. What we say about ourselves, who we are, what we believe in. Now, sometimes those stated values are aligned with our behavior, and sometimes they're not fully aligned. Like Gopabhata Prabhu gave the example of punctuality. I'm quite sure that if we ask everyone in this room, do you believe in the value of punctuality? I don't think anybody will disagree. No, but I don't believe that anybody will say, no, I'm against punctuality as a principle. So we all agree, probably, but how many of us are actually punctual in our behavior? In other words, maybe a stated value, but is it a behavior? So, stated values, we could say the official beliefs. But then there is an even deeper level of culture. And it's so deep that sometimes we are not even aware of its presence. We call that assumptions. Deeply held beliefs, implicit convictions, unchallenged certainties. In other words, we are so convinced about this that we don't even look at them because we take them for granted. We know, or we think we know, that these are true and valid. And those are the most powerful aspect of culture. To use a different analogy, the analogy of lilies or lotus flowers. When you look at a pond, you look on the surface of the water, you see leaves, you see flowers. What we don't see, that there are stems within the water. And those stems have roots in the ground. So what we see, the lilies and lotuses, are behaviors, norms, artifacts, etc., language, food, dress. But they exist because there is a sense of value. There is a sense of what's important. And that sense of what's important is there because we have certain assumptions, a certain philosophy. So there is a direct connection. What we believe, what we say we believe, and what we do. In one sense, you and your culture are one. Because the culture, our culture is our identity, is how we define ourselves. And how we define ourselves in the world, how we define ourselves with others. So, and assumptions are so deep inside, because our brain, our mind, our subconscious, they're like locked. They're locked. It's very hard to even see them. So hard even to evaluate them or analyze them. And I want to give some example, because sometimes the same assumptions may manifest in different artifacts. The same deeply held beliefs may manifest in external forms which are very different among themselves. To give an example, in India, Sri Rangam in Tamil Nadu, the largest Hindu temple, Vishnu temple in India. It's a worship of Ranganath, a form of Krishna, a form of Vishnu. So it's a Vishnu temple, it's a Vaishnava temple. And it has particular structure. There's this huge Gopuram, which is actually the door of the city temple. This is the largest Gopuram in the world. Different structures, different designs. Then let's see another temple, Jagannath Puri. Another Vishnu temple, another Vaishnava shrine. Jagannath is worshipped there. But the form of the temple is very different. The structure of the temple is very, very different. There's no substantial Gopuram. In fact, the dome on the top of the deities is much, much bigger than the entrance. And many, many other differences. But again, the fundamental belief is that God, Vishnu, Krishna should be worshipped. Same assumptions, but manifested externally as difference. Let's go north to Badrinath. Again, a Vaishnava temple. But it looks very different. It looks very different in terms of color, in terms of shape. And of course, we see here, it's full of snow. So obviously you need a ceiling. You can't have something open like in South India. And of course, we could have the whole architectural study on this. But the point is that it's the same Vishnu Bhakti, the same Krishna Bhakti, that's the root of the building. But the building, the architecture, the forms, the shapes, the color manifest in very, very different ways. So sometimes also the behavior among our acharyas. For instance, Srila Gorkishore Das Babaji Maharaj was so renowned, he will hardly interact with materialists. He was living here. Sometimes he would chant near toilets, just not to be disturbed by materialistic people. His lifestyle was very, very particular. Now, his disciple, whose appearance we celebrate today, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, of course he had the same priority. He had the same renunciation, the same Krishna Bhakti, the same dedication to the mission of Lord Chaitanya. But it was manifested externally in a completely different way, as Yukta Vairagya. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would ride cars, when cars were a rarity in India. Almost nobody had a car, but he had one. And he used printing presses, dioramas, all sorts of what was modern technology then. The way he dressed to interact with his audience, the British Raj and the intelligentsia of the time. Again, same assumption, same heart, but external behavior, artifacts, very, very different. And therefore, this can be sometimes confusing. Because we see externally, we see a lot of difference. We see an ISKCON sannyasi, a GBC. Some of you may know his name, maybe. Okay. And either he's in India or he's in America. Either he's talking in the Radha Gopinath temple or in the Vrindavan Parikrama, or he's shaking hands with Mr. Obama. He dressed the same as a Vaishnava sadhu, sannyasi, saffron. Shows that particular profile, the particular style, the particular artifacts in his dress, in his behavior. Now you have another sannyasi. You may also know his name. Oh, okay. And he's also a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. He's also a sannyasi. He's also a GBC. But most of the time, he prefers to present himself in civil clothes. And so you have the same basic assumptions, the same belief, the same philosophy, the same Siddhanta, the same dedication to Srila Prabhupada, the same status of life, sannyasis, but that manifests in quite different ways in the world. So it's very easy to become confused. Fortunately, when they come together, they don't seem to have problems among themselves. And so, this understanding of the roots of what actually motivates us into action is very essential. Again, we may see things which are different. This lotus may have a different color. This lotus may have a different color. But actually, if you see the roots, they're all intertwined. And so we talk at this because leaders are cultural engineers. As leaders, you create the culture. You perpetuate culture. You preserve culture. Or you can change culture at every level. And I want to share with you today 3 sutras. Sutra 1. Whatever you do and whatever you don't do creates culture. This is the blessing and curse of being a leader. In whatever way you choose to behave, or in whatever way you choose not to behave, it establishes a precedent. You talk about book distribution, you do book distribution, it shapes your culture, the culture of your yatra, of your temple, of your zone. You don't talk about book distribution, you don't do book distribution, it shapes the culture of your yatra, your temple, your zone. And there is Shastric support for this sutra. Would you like to all sing together this? Yadyadhacharati Shrestas. So Lord Krishna here is describing a law of nature, that whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. So whatever you do and whatever you don't do shapes the culture. Sutra 2. Either you manage culture or culture manages you. There is no other position. Or we become aware of what's going on in the mind and the heart of devotees, in what we say about ourselves, in what we do as a society, the way we perform our duties, the type of projects we initiate and maintain. Either we are aware and carefully try to stir these projects and activities towards the culture you want, or what exists already will shape, will impose, will dominate the way you do things. And again, there is no alternative. Either you manage culture or culture manages you. I have a little cartoon for you. There are these two employees with this very funny hat, and one says to another, I don't know how it started either. All I know is that it's part of our corporate culture. So these people come to the office, put this weird hat on, and they say, well, I don't know why we do this, but somehow it's part of our culture. That's how we do things here. You know, they don't know where it comes from. I believe that all of you have heard the story of the cat in the basket. Who never heard about the cat in the basket story? Who never heard? Never heard. Never heard. Now you heard it. Okay, shortly, there was a marriage somewhere, and there was a cat. The cat was disturbing the preparations, was actually contaminating things. So the mother of the bride takes the cat and he puts it in a basket. Now, younger people didn't know why. They didn't understand it was just to get rid of the cat. So they thought, oh, this is a very important aspect of the marriage ceremony. So when they got married, they didn't have a cat in the home, but they remember that, oh, my mother or my grandmother, on the wedding day, she put a cat in the basket. So let's find the cat. Let's find the cat in the neighborhood and put it in the basket, because it's an important aspect of the wedding ceremony in our tradition. We don't want to break these traditional laws. Okay, so either you manage culture or culture manages you. This is Edgar Schein. He's a scholar, university professor. He wrote a lot about this. He says, the only thing of real importance that leaders do is to create and manage culture. If you do not manage culture, it manages you. And you may not even be aware of the extent to which this is happening. Talking about culture, sometimes it's a culture or subculture in our ISKCON that we never quote non-devotees. In some place, it's almost blasphemy if you quote a non-devotee. Now, first of all, Srila Prabhupada quoted many times many non-devotees. But besides that, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that Sattvam Sanjayate Jnanam. Sattvaguna gives knowledge. May not give knowledge about the Goloka Vrindavan's affairs, but of this material world, it gives knowledge, Sattvaguna. So there are many people in the world who actually, due to their, call it austerity, dedication, absorption, they learn something about how the the material world works. And so I quote Edgar Schein because he has many realizations of how organizations shape their culture. Third sutra. Your assumptions shape your behavior, and your behavior shapes your assumption. It's a two-way street. We believe certain things, and then we act. But also the way we act shapes the way we believe. In other words, there are these two arrows. There's culture in the sense of assumptions, beliefs, shapes the values and attitudes. This is this arrow. And the value and attitudes shape what we do. But at the same time, also what we do shapes our values and attitudes and shapes our culture or our assumptions. It's a two-way street. Whatever we do reinforces certain attitudes, certain beliefs. There are vicious circles and virtuous circles. Vicious circles means there are patterns, there are dynamics that lead to things being bad or worse. A path of, say, degradation or diversion, deviation. And there are virtuous cycles, activity that they help us becoming better and better and better, more and more purified. Vicious circles and virtuous circles. And I'm going to quickly show you a vicious circle described in the Bhagavad Gita. If you like, we can also sing this together. Bhagavad Gita 2.62-63. Thank you. You sing marvelously. Most of us knows this verse by heart. You contemplate the object of the senses, and then the connection is created. You bring the sense object within. Then that becomes desire, lust. Lust becomes krodha or anger. Then anger turns into bewilderment. Bewilderment affects memory. We forget our better judgment. And then we lose the memory, and we lose also intelligence. And when we lose intelligence, of course, we'll do something very stupid. And when we do something very stupid, there are very bad consequences. Nasho. Buddhinasha, buddhinasha, pranashati. We fall individually or as a movement. But there are also virtuous circles. These are the vicious circle and virtuous circle. The person is here, he can choose to go up through the acceptance of the spiritual master, study of the Veda, austerity, sense control, spiritual knowledge, going up. But he can choose to go down, enamored by attachment, pride, false prestige, ignorance, anger, greed, lust, envy. And a virtuous circle or virtuous path described in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is the path of This was more difficult to change, to chant unison. But you're also familiar with that. First there is some interest, some shraddha, then we look for people who are spiritually minded, and then we start practicing what they practice. We start chanting, start purifying our existence, and then we go up and up. We start purifying our heart, we become fixed, we get taste, we get attachment, we have emotions, spiritual, spontaneous emotions, and then we have love. And it all starts with an action. Internal action. Yeah, maybe there is something more to life than this. And then we get in touch with people, have behavior, and that behavior reinforces that shraddha. So there is nothing new. When we talk about culture, there is nothing new. So, this is a little more subtle. What we see determines what we do. What we do determines what we get. And what we get determines what we see. In other words, what we see, our worldview, our values, our deep belief, what we see in the world, how we define, how do we decode, how we interpret the world, determines what we do in this world. If we see ourselves, for instance, as servants of Krishna, what we'll do? We'll serve Krishna. Then, when we do certain thing, we get certain results. We get certain results, we have certain experience, results both internally and externally. Like we build a temple. We believe we need to build a temple, so we build a temple. Then we build a temple, we get a temple. Say we get a congregation, we get deity worship, we get regular morning program. So, because we got that, what we get determines what we see. And we see that, yeah, temple life is very important. Regulated life is very important. Taking care of the congregation is very important. If we take another path, we focus on something else, we'll get another result, and that other result enables us to see other things. Last slide. Again, an iceberg. Slightly different, same concept, but slightly different. The little penguin says, use this tool to help you think more systemically. Seeing things as a system. There are events, what's happening? So this corresponds to what level of culture? Surface. We also called in different ways. Artifacts, yes. So in other words, events mean something happens, and we see it's happening. But then why it happens? There are certain patterns of behavior. What trends are there over time? And why there are those trends? Because there is certain system, certain structure. How are the parts related? What influences the pattern? And why there are those systems? Because there are certain mental models. What values, assumptions, and beliefs shape the system? I give an example. Some months ago I received an email from a small remote temple in eastern India. A temple president asked me, well, I heard you're involved with the GBC college. Do you have a course that explains how to keep devotees in the temple? Because my devotees, they all want to leave. So do you have a course in the GBC college so I can keep them in the temple? So I answered him, Prabhu, I'm sorry, we don't have this lesson how to keep devotees in the temple when they want to leave. We don't have that lesson. What we are attempting to do in the college, we teach system thinking. That when there is an event, it doesn't come by chance. There are trends, there are systems, and there are mental models. There is a certain culture that shapes the creation of that. So, You have a certain, dear temple president, you have a certain culture that creates certain results. You see certain things and then you get certain results. For instance, probably, I don't know the details, but probably you have, I'm talking with that temple president, you have maybe recruited people who were not really ashram materials. Maybe they were not really educated. Maybe their choice was more based on economic needs or even psychological needs. So you fill up your temple with people who are maybe not really standard people. And therefore now you have problems. And why you did that? What was the mental model? Or maybe you were in a hurry to finish the temple. Maybe you were not doing, say, college preaching. You were not trying to attract educated people. Now see another mental model. Say, Chowpatty. We all heard about the glories of Chowpatty. Or Pune, ISKCON Pune. Their mental models is that we have to focus on intelligent, educated people, young people. So they go to the colleges, they establish a dormitory or an ashram, they attract, they cultivate, they put a lot of energy, and they attract intelligent people. So because they have certain value, certain assumptions, they create system to attract intelligent people. Because they attract intelligent people who choose to live in the temple, the trends is that they don't want to leave. They're not planning. Generally, you don't hear the brahmachari from Chowpatty running away from the temple because it's a choice that they made. They're educated, they have many choices in life, they choose to be in the temple. And so the event is very different. The event is that they are very dedicated, very surrendered, very intelligent brahmacharis. And some of them are actually here, helping with the ILS, giving presentations. So, this was our humble offering, an introduction, if you wish, about culture. We spend more time in the GBC College, generally, on this topic, but I hope you can get something useful. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you very much, Conte Prabhu. We could take it off the screen if you want. Let us use the analogy of a house. Conte Prabhu has portrayed what might be called the foundation of that house. These are fundamental cultural principles. Of course, you've all seen houses where all you see is the foundation. But then on top of that foundation, you can also build rooms, ultimately put a roof on the house. During our plenary sessions, we'll have several different presentations that will pull from these fundamentals that Conte Prabhu just portrayed. And for the next 10, 15 minutes, I'm going to portray one of those rooms, if you will, in that house that draws upon these fundamentals. You see, culture is studied by an awful lot of very smart people within the secular world, be it business or nonprofit or other religions, because culture is so important. And some of these smart people looking at the overall growth, the overall viability, and the overall success of an organization have come forth with some notions of what you might call organizational culture. This was fundamental culture. So I'd like to just speak a few moments on, let's say, one of the core notions of organizational culture coming from the secular world. And as I'm describing this, I'd like you to really be thinking, okay, how does this relate to ISKCON? Specifically then, because what I'm describing is the organizational culture that leads or enhances successful organizations, how would these notions increase the success if our organizational cultures within ISKCON were optimized? Okay? 5 primary dimensions that bring forth more success in an organization than not. The first one is the customer dimension. How does an organization treat its customers? Or, if it's not an economic organization, how does it treat those people that it wishes to affect or influence? Dimension number 2. How does the organization treat or serve its employees? Or, again, if it's not a commercial enterprise, the members of its organization. Dimension number 3. Within that organization, how important or unimportant are the performance and accountability elements within that organization? Anybody can do whatever they want to do. The results are never really looked at, etc., or the results are actually important. Dimension number 4. To what extent does that organization appropriately innovate? And dimension number 5. To what extent does that organization, has it produced and does it utilize strong systems? These 5 are what has been determined to be the primary elements of success or failure in an organization. Let's take a moment and look at whether this has any value to ISKCON. To what extent, if we develop culture in using these fundamental notions that Konteya Prabhu has portrayed, to what extent will we be more successful if we enhance how we interface with those that we are wishing to affect? The quality, the characteristics, the attributes of all of those interactions, millions and millions of interactions in a year's time, hundreds of millions of interactions actually at this point. What's the quality of those interactions? We see examples of devotees within our midst whose quality, characteristics, and attributes of their interactions with those that we're wishing to affect are very high. And frankly, those qualities and characteristics and attributes of those people garner faith and garner popularity. Of course, these saintly people, so they're not out running for mayor or something. They're just trying to serve. But the quality of those interactions with the publics that they're serving, big time. Let's take a look at the second one. With the strategic planning and the organizational development that the GBC has been doing now for some time, a fair amount of energy has been put toward devotee care. It was actually a term that was coined within the GBC. And it's actually filtered throughout ISKCON, and it is largely spoken, and that term is used. I would venture to say that as a result of the efforts that the GBC had just in talking about it and then gradually filtering through, we may care for each other more today than we might have done 10 years ago. But then again, the other side, to what extent, do some of us just feel alienated, or we don't feel completely engaged? The success of our organization is directly affected by how we care for each other. We left the material world for many different reasons, but certainly one of those reasons is because it is a very harsh, uncaring, unloving place. Sometimes in the organizational development and the strategic planning efforts of the GBC, we've looked at Srila Prabhupada's letters and statements about how much he was interested in performance. He wanted reports from every single temple every month. He wanted reports from every single GBC member every month. He wanted to know the book scores. He wanted to know how many new devotees are being made. Is there anybody out here that actually knows how many devotees were made new in 2017? Anyone here? Does anyone know? I guarantee you, nobody in ISKCON knows whether we made more devotees in 2017 or less devotees. Whether more people were initiated or less people were initiated. In Srila Prabhupada's time, he knew. Srila Prabhupada was performance-oriented. Again, going back to the record, Srila Prabhupada's interfacing with the leaders of ISKCON. How many letters are there that relate to accountability? Why is this going on? He trained his GBC members to be accountable. He trained his temple presidents to be accountable. Leaders must be accountable. That's actually part of our culture that might have faded a bit. But when we look at what the secular organizations are saying, hey, successful organizations, one of the criteria of whether they're successful or not is that the leadership, and for that matter all the membership, has a degree of accountability and performance attached to it. Well, we can trace in ISKCON our founder Acharya's statements in that regard. Innovation. We know that Srila Prabhupada does not want, he admonishes us, the many, many statements of don't change any principles in ISKCON, or the whole thing will fail. Yet at the same time, one of the reasons of his success was his innovation. And previously it was discussed about in the culture thing, the innovation that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur brought to the Vaishnava preaching in the Gaudiya Math. Every organization must, especially as generations are changing, must innovate. Yet at the same time, if you try to change the principles, the whole thing fails. Organizations of the world look at their organizations and say to themselves, are we appropriately innovating? And lastly is systems. Systematically propagate Krishna consciousness. To what extent have we developed strong systems so that our standards are being kept? The standards of deity worship are there. The standards of actually how we interface with the public. The notion that we actually keep track of all of the money that we have. You'll hear, if you go to Govardhan Prabhu's seminars, you'll start hearing something about the economy of ISKCON. But because of its importance, we're actually going to have him lead a seminar here at the plenary on this topic. There has to be accounting systems. There has to be various systems to keep the wheels moving. So, in this regard, basically, consider these 5 and how important organizational culture can be for ISKCON in its ultimate success. How do we treat those that we wish to influence? How do we treat each other? To what extent is performance and accountability important in this room and outside in the world of ISKCON? Are we appropriately innovating to move along with how the societies are changing so that we can properly present Krishna consciousness? And lastly, how strong are the systems that support all of the activities of spreading Krishna consciousness and taking care of devotees? So, Gauranga Prabhu, I'm going to get close to the close of our plenary. And as you can remember yesterday, we made the point that, yes, you've all paid a dear amount of money to come here, and we thank you for that. And the total facility and everything that's being offered to keep these 8 days going, of course, is just not enough. So, we want to honor those people that are making up the difference so that we can all have this nice 8 days together and not be running in the red.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Gopal Bhatta Prabhu. So we are very honored that today Prasadam has been sponsored by 2 yatras. First of all, we have devotees from ISKCON Madurai who are requesting all the devotees here assembled at ILS to pray for the health of His Holiness Jayapatak Swami Maharaj. And I would like to invite His Grace Balram Govind Prabhu on behalf of ISKCON Madurai to come and please accept this. Haribol! And he has requested that all devotees chant once the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. We also have on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of ISKCON Juhu, ISKCON Juhu has also kindly sponsored today's Prasadam, and we have Mukund Madhav Prabhu, who is the Vice President of ISKCON Juhu. Brajari Prabhu is also here, but he is busy with other things. Haribo! Thank you very much. And in case any other yatras or communities are interested, you can please contact me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gauranga Prabhu. I can't remember if yesterday we mentioned that Guranga Prabhu has headed up the effort to encourage donations, and so that's why he's congratulating these wonderful devotees to help us. Konteya Prabhu, please close our plenary and send everyone to the seminars.
The plenary is almost closed. So we have one seminar period, and then we have lunch. Lunch is optional. You already fasted half day, you want to go for the whole day, there's no objection from the organizers. Otherwise, there is one seminar session and then lunch. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.